انت شاب وبتفتش عن برنامج تعليمي، زون 72 برنامج خاص لك انت، بيتم فيه مناقشة كثير من المواضيع اللي بخصك، وفيه انت ممكن كمان تعبر عن رأيك وتتواصل مع شباب بنفس تفكيرك. زون 72 بيجيكم في كل يوم السبت من الساعة 4 مساء للساعة 5 مساء على الهواء وعلى الإنترنت، فقط على أي راديو. عينك على جنوب السودان.
Yes, good evening, listen of iRadio, and welcome to the Zone 72 Youth Program, which comes to you every Saturday from 4 to 5 p.m. I am your host, Barry Johnson, and as usual, I also have with me in the studio Grace Amviko, who is our sign language interpreter. Zone 72 highlights on the rights and choices for all adolescent and youth, and it emphasizes on the three-pillared global strategy for adolescent and youth, putting young people at the center of sustainable development. Zone 72 Youth Program is in collaboration with the South Sudan Ministry of Health, South Sudan Nurses and Midwives Association, Shabab Le Shabab, Canadian Association of Midwives, and UNFPA. Zone 72 is made possible with support from the Global Affairs Canada. Well, to comment on today's program, you'll be calling us on our studio lines, that is 0911 or 0922 986 986, and for text messages, send to the 0913 986 986. You can also stream this broadcast live by logging on to our website, that is www.iradio.org, or on our Facebook page, that is iRadio. You can also watch this live stream on our YouTube channel, that is iRadio South Sudan. If you have questions about adolescent health, send us an email to youthzone72@gmail.com or call 0922009497. We also have two hotlines, and they're toll free. If you want to report on GBV, you can call 623, and if you want to report on adolescent health immediate, call 885. Today we are going to be discussing a crucial topic, that is sexual violence in conflict. We are going to look at elimination of sexual violence in conflict, which remains one of the grave human rights violations, causing suffering and long-term consequences for individuals and communities. And the elimination of sexual violence in settings of conflict requires urgent intervention and advocate for justice to provide survivor-centered support and lasting prevention. And to shed more light on our topic of today, I'm pleased to have with me in the studio Deco Janet Isaac, who is the chairperson of the Youth Advisory Panel of Plan International. And I also have with me Biel Cha, who is a male champion with Men for Women. Good evening.
Hello.
Good evening. Where's the excitement? You guys look...
Well, the excitement is all there.
Okay. It's good to have you guys in the studio to highlight this very important topic. So listen, if iRadio, be close to your radio, and also those who are watching us on Facebook, so that you drop your comments and questions later on for our guests to answer them. Let me start with Biel. If you can explain in simple terms what sexual violence in conflict is.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me and having this topic here. Well, when we talk about conflict-related sexual violence or sexual violence in conflict, it's broad, in that conflict itself is a whole different concept. And then sexual violence alone is a different concept. Now, when they come together, then creates a whole different picture for us. In short, I would tell you, when we talk about conflict, just to have the context, when we talk about conflict, we are having either individual groups or societies that have different either values or different ways in which they see things, leading to the fact that then they would conflict among themselves. Now, when we talk about sexual violence, we're referring to either rape, we're talking about maybe forced pregnancies, we're talking about maybe for instance, maybe marriages at some point. But now, to bring them together is having these different vices of sexual violence in conflict. So the things that people, the things that they do when now there's a conflict, they would normally be there, but now when there's a conflict, they seem to be more than usual. Is what we refer to sexual violence in conflict.
Okay. Yes, Deco, do you want to add anything on what he said? And according to you, what is the status of when you look at sexual violence in conflict at our setting here in South Sudan?
Sorry. All right, thank you so much for that question. Before I go into the question that you just asked me, I just want to reflect on what BL talked about. And when we talk about sexual violence in conflict, I think we're talking about the violation of human rights, and that's mostly, and the most affected people are the women. And then the question that you just asked about the scope or the context of South Sudan, yes, the cases are there and they're happening. Yes.
Okay. And how do you think young people can contribute to the fight against sexual violence in conflict settings?
All right. Thank you so much. Young people have a very big role to play. Just for the data, we all know that South Sudan's young population is up to 70% of the entire population. This means that the young people have a very big role to play. And what are the roles that the young people can do? This is what we're doing right now. Today, I believe that somebody down there is able to listen to this radio and is able to get informed. So there's need for us as young people to create awareness and sensitization. Why is that so? Because it helps the people out there to know about what is happening, and then they can also be advocates to speak about this kind of cases. Yeah.
Yes, Bill, you want to add something?
Yes. So when we look at sexual violence in conflict, we looked at who carries out that conflict, because we also love the context of the fact that since it is within conflict, and the actors are either the perpetrators of the conflict, or these are opportunists who take the advantage of the fact that there's a lot of instability in terms of law and order. Then they take advantage of that small space, and then they do that. So the way that young people can contribute to eliminating sexual violence in conflict is, first of all, to acknowledge that it is present. Because for the context of South Sudan, I am very sure that it is not talked about enough. Because we've seen time and again, when we hear a conflict, we only see in terms of who has been killed, who has been injured, what property has been taken, but we never ask, or it is never reported that there are cases of sexual violence, but they are present. So when we acknowledge that there is sexual violence and conflict, it is one step to us finding an end to sexual violence or the reduction of sexual violence. The other thing that the youth can be able to do is to make sure that there is a sensitization. For instance, there is a lot of stigma. If someone has gone through sexual violence, especially boys, in the context of South Sudan, they don't come out because of stigma. How do you come out to say, I was sexually abused? The environment is not conducive enough to allow us to come out to say, oh, this has happened to me. The same thing with women as well. They go through stigma. You're told to take in whatever happens. But if there is a conducive environment that lets them know that when you come out and tell us what has happened, there is a situation whereby you will be protected for coming out. You are going to receive justice. There's accountability for the people that have done that. They will be held accountable. And then there is also survivor support. That way, the young people can be able to reduce sexual violence in conflict when those have been looked at.
Just an addition?
Yes.
All right. I think when we talk about the roles of young people, we are looking at it at the broader picture. BL talked about awareness and sensitization, which I earlier talked about. But then it's very important, as I said, for us to understand what could be the root cause of this violence. Because in understanding that, if we know that maybe the rule of law is not being implemented, then young people can take that as an opportunity to advocate for the rule of law to be strengthened. Yes.
Okay. And apart from the stigma that BL talked about, what do you think, Diko, are some of the long-term impacts or consequences faced by survivors of sexual violence and conflict?
All right. I will also talk about the health impacts of all this that happens. Let me give an example of sexual violence that happens. For example, we have the rape. We can also put child forced marriages in that category, and we all know the consequences. For example, if you're raped, first of all, your health is at risk. You stand chances of getting STDs and STIs, and not only that, you also have a high chance of getting pregnant. So in a community that stigmatizes this kind of acts, and most times these acts are not being spoken about, it can also lead to trauma and depression. We have a lot of rising cases of suicide where young people just decide to take their lives. And we know also the impact that it has on the country.
Okay. Yes, and Biel, why is it so important to engage men and boys in efforts to eliminate sexual violence in conflict? I understand most of the time we look at the men as the perpetrators. So why is it so important to engage them in efforts to eliminate this vice?
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, so we've seen it time and again that when we talk about sexual violence, we quickly run to the male species. So we are determined to be the ones that carry out sexual violence. So in line with the fact that it is deemed that men do that, it's only natural that we be able to engage these men, because it is true, much as it's not only men, but the fact that there are men that actually do it enables us to reach out to the men, to sensitize them, to tell them the dangers. My colleague was telling you about the consequences. The fact that we can engage these men in consequences of sexual violence. For instance, we've talked about how this has brought a lot of death. We've seen sexual violence causing families to fight among themselves. Then goes to community. It escalates too much. So the fact that we engage men, since they are the ones that people have come out to say men do them, it's only natural that we reach out to these men, sensitize them, tell them why. Because when we looked at the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2000, it has been deemed that sexual violence has been used as a tactic of war. So it literally means that they dehumanize you. So the young men are the ones that carry out these attacks. So the fact that you tell them, would you want this to happen to your family member? Would you want this to happen to your sister? How would you feel if this happens? The fact that we engage them gives them the clear conscience to let them know that these are the consequences. Would you want this to happen? The fact that you give them the whole narrative, the picture that you paint as a result of sexual violence helps them humanly to know that, when this happens, we need to look out for this. If there's a war, we need to know that this and this could happen, and then it's easily handled. Yes. Okay,
and Diko, do you? Yes, I'm coming to you. Do you see, from your advocacy work, do you see that men they would love to be part of the awareness raising, part of the efforts in eliminating this?
All right, thank you. Before joining the Plan International Youth Advisory Panel, I was a female champion, and I still am, in engaging men in accountable practices. And just to add on what Biel was talking about, why it's important to involve men, when you look at most of the cases, when you look at most of the numbers of these acts that are happening, we find that it's mostly the men that cause them. Yeah. We are not undermining the fact that men also experience this from women, but we're trying to look at the numbers. And that's why most times when you talk about sexual violence, whether it's in conflict or out of conflict, people rush to what? To women. They think it's only women who are the victims. But this is a narrative that we're trying to change. So why is it important to involve men? Involving men helps people to take accountability. Like Biel said, when we know that, okay, this is happening because of this and this, well, how about we put the men together and then talk to them, we'll tell them about what they're doing, and then they take accountability and see how they can, involved in the process. You asked a very nice question. You were asking about whether the men are interested in getting involved, something of that kind. Yes, from my experience and with my work with young men and even older men, and that was basically in the engaging men in accountable practice model, when we reached out to the men in the communities and then we talked to them. Because how the EMAP works, we go to the women first and then we get their voices and then we go to the men. So the women will tell us, this is what is happening, the men are doing A, B, C, D to us. So these voices are collected anonymously and given to the men. And then the men, in the beginning, they're going to deny. But then eventually they'll come to a sense of realization that, yes, this is what we're doing, but how can we work better? Honestly speaking, we live in a society that we both need each other. If we say that we just want to do our things as women alone, we're not going to achieve them. And if men say, okay, we are superior, we're going to do our things alone, they're also not going to achieve them. So in growing and in developing most of these things, we need each other, both men and women, because we know that we are the ones causing this and we are the victims. So let's work together and see how we can improve them. Thank you.
All right. Biel, being a male champion, so which strategies have you seen that is more effective when it comes to engaging communities in the fight against sexual violence?
All right. So the strategy that would work, or that has proven to work, is to be able to break it down. For instance, we know it's evident in the community, there is an element of prevention. So an element of prevention does not only take one person, it takes a community. So what happens that there is supposed to be a responsibility of young people, both girls and boys, responsibilities of mothers, responsibilities of elders, and the state authorities or the national authority, whereby they have, from the organized forces, they are trained, they are supposed to be trained on how to handle sexual violence, especially when there is a conflict. I mean, they could still do it when there's no conflict, but then they have to be aware that in a case of conflict, those underlying issues rise up in high amounts. So what is supposed to happen is that they must be reporting centers. They must be organized places that are recognized and protected places that people can easily come out to speak and say such and such a thing has happened. How do we do this? If they are veiled from the villages to the town centers, whereby someone would not fail to find help, right? So I think that is a strategy that works when we have people, especially in terms of villages, people that they can confide in, because it's not a matter of having maybe a reporting place, but they have to have credibility. We've seen that even peacekeepers, sorry to say, even peacekeepers, there are incidents that happen that even peacekeepers perpetrate this activity. So for it to work, it takes a whole lot of people, a lot of actors that need to be able to work together to find out what works. But all in all, there must be prevention, there must be accountability, there must be survival support, and that's what the communities have to be able to understand and must be able to put in place.
Okay, yes, Diko?
I would just say it's not a one man's business and it's not a one day's business. So for us to come to a conclusion, it's an everyday work, coming to the policies, coming to what can be done in the communities, and also coming to we as individuals, what is it that we want to do. Most of these actions are committed in groups, but some of them comes to individual level. Yeah.
And also, Diko, like, what are some of the biggest obstacles that young like the activists and advocates face when they are addressing conflict-related sexual violence?
All right. Thank you so much. That's a very wide one, but I'm just going to try. First of all, I would speak about freedom of speech and expression. Yes, as much as the numbers are out there, sometimes it's hard to speak about certain things because of the context and a lot of things that are happening. And then sometimes we do not have the information on time, and then some people choose not to report. Sometimes I might be raped in my community. Maybe something has happened to me, but because of the stigma, because of everything that happens in that particular community, I choose not to speak about it, because maybe my family will not accept. Because imagine your daughter growing up, and then people say, you know, this one was one day heading to this particular place, and then ABCD happened to her. So it's a very wide thing. So if we don't report these cases, people are not going to know. And it also comes the same thing to men, because if the men also do not speak up about what is happening to them, the numbers will still continue being low. The communities we come from stigmatizes men from speaking up, because as a man, even if physical violence, when you tell somebody that your woman beat you, your sister beat you, you know, the first impression is, how did they do that? Because maybe men are muscular and a lot of things. So there's a lot of negativity out there.
Okay. Yes.
That's very interesting. You know, when we looked at the reasons why activists find it challenging to talk about conflict-related sexual violence, dynamic as well. It depends on where you are. It depends on who you are. Because let's say if I'm a man and I intend to want to advocate for sexual violence and conflict, first of all, the community that I'm in will dictate on what I should do and what I shouldn't do. For instance, families do not want cases of sexual violence because they somehow think it's going to bring shame. The way they look at it, they say it's going to bring shame to the family. So who are you that is going to be able to let out this information for us? If we have not communicated, who are you to communicate? That's cases when you're the man. Then there are cases when you are the woman. Then you fear to be confronted because maybe for especially in gender in the gender norms, whereby people feel like men are more superior than women. Who are you to talk to us even? You know, so she can't go talk to men. So they're like, how do you come and talk to us? And then there are cases whereby the perpetrators are in power. Let's assume the chief is not doing it. Then who am I that's going to come up to say, because the person I'm supposed to report to is the one that's perpetrating it? So that means I am not safe. The same thing. If I'm in the town setting, maybe I'm supposed to go to the police, but the person that's committed it is a policeman. What am I safe? So those are things that you look at. The same thing if I'm in the protection zones, if the peacekeepers aren't doing it, whom am I supposed to report to? So that is what prevents a lot of activists from actually letting out their voices, because of those very many challenges that hinder them from actually giving out the actual information.
Okay, all right. Yes, listen of iRadio, our time is 21 minutes past the hour of 4. Yes, you have a chance now to call in and ask our guest any question on our topic of today, which is the elimination of sexual violence in conflict. Our numbers are 0911 or 0922986986. If you're also following the program on our Facebook live stream, you can drop your comments and questions there, and I'll read them to our guest in the studio. 0911 or 0922986986. These are the numbers that will bring you live to the studio. Now, Biel, what social norms and beliefs contribute to sexual violence in conflict, and how can men help challenge and dismantle them?
Thank you very much. First of all, these cultural norms are set by a certain group of people. I, for sure, know that women never set these rules. All right? So I'm very sure that men set these cultural norms. So it is the same men that have to reconvene to make sure that some of these cultural norms are, they are restudied or dismantled. So, for instance, men think women shouldn't be able to be in discussions, even for things that concern them. For instance, also men feel like women are subjects. So, I mean, you could have, as long as you could wrestle, there are cultures that allow you to wrestle a woman. As long as you can wrestle her, it's okay. All right? So they don't consider that rape. So, first of all, also, we need to go in there to make sure that we sensitize them. When we sensitize them, and then we can go to the actors. So men need to be able to reconvene and know there are cultural norms that are very destructive that need to be restudied and changed. That way we can have a better work environment for both women and men. And I always reiterate and say, we must do it peacefully. Like we said earlier, we engage men. We are not going to throw rocks at them, but we're going to engage them to say, hey, this is what's happening. How do you see?
Yeah, okay. Yes, let's hear from Dick also.
All right. That topic is very broad when we talk about cultural norms, because it encompasses the whole component of our cultures. I think if there's one thing I know about South Sudan, with all the 64 plus tribes, we have very amazing cultures. Again, we also have some habits, some norms and traditions that are not really good. And most of these norms are the ones that actually fuel the violences that are happening, whether it's in homes, in the communities, or even in the country at large. I think one thing that I can talk about is early child forced marriages, which is a very common habit in the context of South Sudan, because you find a young girl is growing up and then suddenly she has to drop out of school, and then she has to get married to somebody that maybe is not out of her will. You know, some cultures accept that. I'm not here to disagree with it, okay? And then some cultures do not practice that. But then sometimes we don't think about the well-being of this child. We don't think about the age of this child, because I'm imagining a very young child is forced for marriage, and eventually when a child is married, she has to give birth. And there are a lot of cases in the hospitals right now where you find young teenage girls are trying to give birth. At the end of the day, they lose their lives. So these cultures are there, yes. Some of them are good, but some of them are bad that can be worked on to make sure that we're able to accommodate all, and also we're also able to live in a peaceful society. Like Biel said, most of these things should be handled peacefully. Because when we look at the topic of our conversation today is conflict-related violence. I believe that at some point, if we can also deal away with the conflict, it means we can have peace, and then with peace, of course, there is no violence, right? So it's a very big topic. That means we can deal with both the aspect of peace and then the aspect of violence that happens all in between.
Okay. And Biel, have you from the work you do, like, have you seen any let me say progress in effort to address the issues of sexual violence and conflict, either from the authorities or from the community?
Well, yes, a lot. The fact that they have a lot of conversation around it, which was not the case many years ago. Sexual violence or sex as a topic was never discussed openly, but now we've moved from that many years ago, and we can be able to talk about this openly, both women and men. The fact that they can talk about it means there is already a foundation, there is already a platform in which both men and women can come together to say, hey, this is what's happening. right? We have this problem. Can we do this? Can we do this? And we've now seen it. The fact that we engage these men, they keep talking about these things. It has come to people. It has come to people's minds that now we need to talk about these. So now it's upon the woman, the man that has gone through one of our trainings, or has been able to be with us and worked with us, that now is able to, because what we do, we train to train others. So we have this set of women, we have this set of men that we impact, and then we have these people go back to their communities and convene and have these conversations. And we only guide them. We only guide them through what to discuss, and then as long as it's peaceful, we've seen it work. We've really seen it work. We've seen a lot of people, a lot of conversations around sexual violence, a lot of maybe these cultural norms now. People are talking about them. Before, they used to be a woman could not talk to a man, or could not even convene or get up in front of people and discuss. But now we've seen women take lead, and you find even a woman is a chairperson, and they're like, okay, things are happening.
Okay.
Well,
Yes, Biko.
All right. Just to add on what BL talked about, I think there's a lot of improvement. Yes, as much as it's not to where women want to be at or men want to be at, but there's a lot of improvement. One improvement is me being able to come to iRadio and speak. Another improvement is we can see the 35%. BL, why are you laughing? We can see the 35% affirmative action. We can see girls going to school. We can see girls not getting married at a very young age. So that means there's an opportunity that some things can still be discussed and certain things can still be worked on. Yes. Compared to long ago, these days, even when there are cases of rape, there are people that are able to speak up. They go and report these cases, yes, as much as those ones who are still in the community are not able to do that. That means there's still need for us to continue carrying out awareness and sensitization, and also bring these conversations to tables and even take it to the community. Bill talked about certain communities, they never used to be open about certain topics of discussion. I think these days there's really improvement and things seems to be going quite well. Yes.
Okay, like from this improvement, do you see survivors coming out to speak about what they went through themselves? Not, for example, not a whistleblower speaking that up, but the survivor who went through that coming up and speaking about it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
There are platforms, there are forums that you go to, and then you find the survivors. There are actually initiatives, there are groups that support them. So you find they come and speak, and the main reason why they speak is because they want others to also be able to speak about the experiences. Because I'm trying to imagine a survivor is speaking about the experience, and then you also maybe has that experience, and that gives you the energy, the strength to also be able to speak about what you've been going through, and also helps you know that in this fight you're not alone. There are people that have experienced whatever thing you've been through. So how about you team up and then you guys can work together? Why? Because you want something better and you don't want the same story to keep repeating itself. Yes.
Okay. Yes. Biel, how do you see, for example, education programs and dialogue help shift attitudes and behaviors regarding gender-based violence in conflict settings?
Okay, so there are two ways in which that is effective. Because what we work for, or what we would really want to say, is effective way in which this can be handled. For instance, I've seen educational programs that really work, the dialogues, but they work best when the context is local. If we have actual people from those communities actually carry out those activities, their own, not somebody from somewhere, and then they feel there's always that rift, and they say, oh, it's a concept that's being imposed on us. But when they're from that same community with that same language, not translated, there's a way how there's a lot of trust that is built, and they know this is something that can really work. And I always advise that we must take it to the villages. There are many challenges that happen that when we do it, let's assume Juba, and then we help impact young people, both girls and boys, and then when they go back to their different states, they face a lot of conflict because the concepts that they're now used to are not the concepts within their states. So it needs to make sure that it starts from the state as they come, not from the capital to the state. Yes. In that way, we have solidated that, and we have made it a normal behavior to have these discussions, have this dialogue, this education, or this educative dialogues that can help to erase or eradicate conflict-related sexual violence.
Okay. Yes. Do you have any addition?
Yes, I have an addition. When you look at education, I want to quote from Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela said, "Education is the only weapon we can use to change the world. And I think it's a very effective thing, because when people go to school, they learn. When they learn, they unlearn certain things. You find when I was younger, when I used to go to school, there are things that I used to see as okay, but as I grow, I become self-conscious. I become able. I begin to understand a lot of things, and because of that, it gives me clarity. It gives me the understanding about people, the differences, and everything in between. So, how am I saying this? Education is a very important thing that we can use to transform the communities that we come from. Because right now, if your father has gone to school, trust me, that your father is not going to allow. That particular father is not going to allow their children not to go to school because they know the impact of education. And that's why we see a lot of cases where girls now go to school. If you go to schools right now, you find majority actually ladies, and you find they're excelling and they're doing well, better than the men. Male, I'm not competing, but I think those are facts and realities on ground. So it's very effective, and it's something that is working. Yes.
Okay. And BL, which I believe there are frameworks that have been set by the government to address gender-based violence in general. So which ones do you think have been really very effective in the elimination of GBV in conflict setting, and also bringing the perpetrators into book, those who committed all these things?
Well, thank you very much. Yes. So the past 2 years, there were a lot of cases from Rumbek of convicted perpetrators, which was very okay. Like as a result of GBV, both men and women that carried out gender-based violence, which is very, very okay. So the government has put in place, may not be at 100%, but it has frameworks in which we've now seen at least a good number of perpetrators being able to be held into account. And in areas in which that has been done, there's been like a lot of drastic change in terms of the practice of GBV. And also we've also seen the both international NGOs and local NGOs actually come out, and they've done tremendous work.
And we have also seen the GBV code now. So we have a special code for gender-based violence. Yes, Nico.
All right. I think I just want to talk about the Constitution. And this is one document that protects almost everybody in this country, because we have a lot of cases where things have happened, and most times the Constitution is used as a reference. And then if you look at the cases of early child and forced marriages, it's normally the Children's Charter that protects the children. So we have the African Youth Charter that protects the rights of these children, that gives them the opportunity to go to school. Even some of the marriages that have, gotten online presence where activists have been talking about it, most times they actually quote from the Constitution. You find a girl is 16, 15, and the Constitution says 18. So what happens is the Constitution is used to back it up.
Okay. All right. Yes, listen of iRadio, you still have a chance to call in on 0911 or 0922 986 986 to ask our guest in the studio your question regarding the elimination of sexual violence in conflict. 0911 or 0922 986 986. These are the numbers that will bring you live to our studio. And also, those who are on our Facebook live stream, you can drop your questions. I can see some questions there, so keep them coming, and then I will read them out to our guest in the studio so that they answer them for you. So let's look at long-term strategies that you two believe can be put in place to ensure continuous effort toward eliminating sexual violence in conflict. Let's start with Diko, but before that, let's pick this call. iRadio. Okay, sorry, you can still call us back on the same numbers, 0911 or 0922 986 986, and he'll be connected with us live in the studio. And if you're calling in, make sure you're a bit far from your radio, or you put your radio off so that we can get your message or your question clear. So we start with
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, the question is what strategies, long-term strategies that you believe should be put in place to ensure the continuous effort in toward eliminating sexual violence in conflict. So Biel, maybe you can answer, then we go to Diko.
Yes, there should be tribunals there are existing tribunals, international tribunals. There are also local courts or hybrid courts, and then even up to the state level. But what I personally believe would be the best, because we've seen when we talk about conflict-related sexual violence happens in conflict. So when we talk about the organized forces, whether they have gone through the training to know what it is and how to prevent it, they must be departments set up for specifically CRSV, and then put somebody that is entirely in charge. Should there be a conflict, they know who is where, and then that person is indeed in charge of knowing or oversight to know should there anything happen, the forces can be able to report to them. That means now with organized forces it's easy for reporting, and then also easy for accountability. When we talk about the local settings, there are local courts. The only issue I have with local courts is they have their own way in which they sort out cases of conflict-related sexual violence. For instance, if a girl child has been raped, maybe there's compensation, but compensation is only taken by the family, but not to the girl. The girl doesn't receive justice, so the perpetrator only pays those cows, and then they're let free. But those are things that I feel and know that can work if we are to be put in place.
Okay. Yes, Diko.
All right. I think one thing that would really work very well is actually enforcement or strengthening the rule of law. So as a country, we have the constitutions, we can have the treaties, we can have all these documents, but then if there's no implementation, I think we'll just be singing the same songs, we'll be speaking the same things, we'll be coming to the same radio station and talking the same thing over and over again. So there's really need for accountability, because most times when there are conflicts, you find people tend to commit all these impunities, and if they're not taken into accountability, if these people don't face the law, if these people are not taken into records, and maybe they face the consequences of their actions, the same thing keeps repeating. Because if so and so does ABCD today, and then so and so walks freely, it means tomorrow somebody else is going to do the same thing, knowing so and so did the same thing and walked out freely. So there's need for us to strengthen these institutions, and then it also comes to individual responsibility, state responsibility, and also the government playing a very key role. Because as South Sudanese, we are all under the government, but then it's the government to do most of that implementation in terms of the rule of law.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, let's pick this call. Yes, iRadio. Hello, iRadio. Good evening. Okay, sorry about that, but you can still call us back 0911 or 0922 986 986, and you'll be connected with us in the studio. Let's go through some of the comments on our Facebook live stream. We have Akoi Madudit. He says, I'm watching you from Kampala, Uganda. And then we have Maulana Bol Yel Gag. He says, I am watching live from Juba. We have Gatkoth Dieng. He says, I am a very, very good topic. Thank you so much. And we have Gabriel Gatluak React. He says, yes, we have another comment from Maulana Boliel. He says, how can our communities be aware of sexual violence? Okay. And then we have Sovereign Guard Company Limited. It says, in what practical ways can humanitarian actors and communities work together to prevent and respond to sexual violence in conflict settings, ensuring survivors receive justice, protection, and long-term support? Thank you so much for this question. Our guests are going to answer that. And then we have Botson Matata. He says, I'm watching you from United Arab Emirates, Dubai. Thanks for the educative program. All right. Okay. Thank you so much for that. And then we have Diversity, Equity, Inclusion. It says, great show and great people to be working in this area of justice. Thank you for the sign language interpreter. Okay. He says, do you find with work being done with increased access to women's hygiene products in school, that conversation will be more easy in the future with less stigma? Okay, all right. I found the program very educative, and I hope for continuous peace and success to you all. All right, thank you so much. So we have two questions. Someone is asking, how can our communities be aware of sexual violence? And then we have another question that asks, in what practical ways can humanitarian actors and communities work together to prevent and respond to sexual violence in conflict settings, ensuring survivors receive justice, protection, and long-term support. Yes, Biel, maybe you can pick that, and then Diko can add something to it.
All right. So we start with the first one or the?
Yes, let's start with the last question. Then we go to that.
Yeah. So the last question wants us to know how our communities can, the communities can work together to achieve that. Yes. Just like we were talking earlier, that this is not a one-man duty. It needs everybody to put their hands on it to make it a success, to make it effective. For instance, we need to make sure that people are speaking up. As soon as people speak up, then people will even believe that it is happening. It's one thing for people to say it is happening in the community, but it is the other thing for the community to acknowledge and confirm that yes, we have case A, case B, case C that have really happened. And then it happens to both the men and the women. So once people speak up, it's easy now. Could it be survival support? Maybe there have been disease that has been transmitted. Now we go to either the health facilities. The government is the number one person to be sought after. If not, they are our international partners. There are local NGOs that can help. If it is psychosocial support, they are already provisions that can help people that have survived from those to be helped. So I know that in order for this to be a success, the community plays a part, the government plays a part, our international partners play a part, the local people play a part, and the community members themselves, because they're the ones that are going to see. So I know that for a fact that can be able to work.
Okay, yes, Diko.
All right, I think Biel has almost talked about everything. Let me just try to wrap it up in case he missed out something. I think he mentioned something about reporting, and I think that is the first key component that we also have to acknowledge. Because if people don't report about these cases, how do you go and start speaking about something that nobody's talking about it? So it comes back to individuals. If these things are happening in the communities where we come from, we need to speak up about them. And then secondly is the intervention. With the intervention, I think it's high time that the government takes responsibilities, individuals take responsibilities, and also these humanitarian organizations take responsibilities, because most times you find one party is left to do most of the work, which is not the right way to do things. So we need to work together collectively, because for example, this particular institution will say, okay, I'm going to be managing the health, and then sometimes even in the police stations you go and report this kind of cases, and you find a police officer will ask you, where were you when you got AB, when ABCD happened to you? People have a lot of questions that are happening. So we need to acknowledge that ABCD is happening, and then there can be interventions. And some of the interventions are what Bill talked about.
Yes, just to add on to something that's very important that I almost forgot. People need to be sensitized. And what I mean, because when you talk about sexual violence, people think that it's until it is done. People don't understand the different versions in which sexual violence is committed. The fact that someone who is in a higher position, let's assume a humanitarian worker, says, if you want this rice, I can even just touch you. It's part of the violence. People, if we can be able to separate and give these people different forms of sexual violence, that helps them identify, because someone don't even know. Someone thinks that sexual violence is when it actually, when there is physical assault. But the fact that we can sensitize them to let them know the different versions of sexual violence, even you coercing someone to do something for you sexually is sexual violence. So that alone has to be, cross-sectional from the community up to the partners and all.
Okay, and also the question of Maulana Boliel Gak, he said, how can our communities be aware of sexual violence?
I think this brings us to awareness and sensitization. And how can we do that? Right now we're in the radio stations. I believe there are people that are hearing about this topic for the first time, and I believe that it's also not going to remain with them. But then before we continue, I just want to take us back to the previous question that we talked about, something that I think has also touched me at some point. Most times we look at all these conflict-related violences, and then we put it on maybe people in uniform, maybe a lot of things that are happening, but we also don't understand that for us to get rid of these things, we also need to do a lot of work. Like for example, we have the arms control. There are people that have arms, and they use it as an opportunity, as a privilege to use it against people that do not have the power that they do. So this is a very crucial thing when discussing. We talk about poverty. Most times you find you do not have maybe what is required, maybe even sometimes it's food, and then you find you end up succumbing to this. Yes, as much as it's violent, sometimes women given. Why? Because they do not have ABCD that is happening. There are cases where girls are forced for early marriages because of poverty, because the family wants to improve their standard of living. So they believe if they give their child out for marriage at that young age, you know, the family can also be able to stand strong and community status.
Okay, and there is also the issue of legal aid. You know, when you come out and speak and you know the perpetrator, there will be a case. And BL, do you think that the issue of legal aid is a challenge to survivors? You know, some of them cannot even afford to have a lawyer to follow up the case.
Yes. Yes. First of all, if an individual gathers the strength and the resources to try and maybe get legal aid, it's expensive. But for cases in which you even afford a lawyer, the perpetrator, depends on how strong he is. It goes back to the element of what he is in the community. Should he be of a higher value than what is normally called acceptable, then it's a challenge. Even the lawyer himself or herself would have issues. First of all, you don't have enough money, and then when you try to get the money, then it's a challenge of, can you win this? Because it's going to be pushed back and forth. If you look at the justice system, it's not straight. Oh, it's not so fair. All right. So it needs us to be able to relook and there must be reforms. There should be judicial reforms in which they could even be legal help to somebody who does not have the resource to do that. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Diko, you want to add something?
Yes, I just wanted to add something, and I think it comes from the aspect of knowing the person that you're dealing with. Because if you're dealing with a high profile person, sometimes it becomes hard for you to get justice, because some of these high profile people that commit these atrocities, they are the same people that will make sure they block the way to justice. Yes.
Okay. All right. We have another comment on Facebook from Tyran Skita. He says, women gave birth and raised the strongest men in the nation. It's our collective responsibility to shield and protect women against sexual violence and gender-based violence forms. Okay, thank you so much. We have Luis JNR Willie. He says, I'm watching you from Yambio. Very important topic. Thank you all for these interesting comments. We are left with a few minutes to be leaving the studio, and if you still have any questions to our guests, you have a few minutes to call in and ask them, as long as the topic, your question is on our topic of the day. We have another comment from Rif Lopudo. He says, I absolutely agree. It's heartbreaking to see women's bodies used as battlegrounds in conflict. They deserve our unwavering support, protection, and respect, especially in these challenging times. Let's continue to advocate for their rights and dignity. Thank you for addressing this crucial issue. And he said, besides the comment I shared, the question, he has a question. He's asking about okay, I think the question is not related to our topic, so I'm not going to read it out, but thank you so much for that interesting nice comment on our topic for today. So Biel and Dick, I'm going to give each one of you a chance to share their last messages, both to the government, to the listener who follow the program, and also to survivors of this gender-based violence in conflict setting. Let's start with Bill. I'm seeing Diko is pointing at you.
He talks a lot.
All right. Thank you very much for having us. My last comment to our government and to people that are active actors. Please let us stop, or at least acknowledge the fact that sexual violence and conflict is real. It's happening. It has consumed enough of us. To the government, please have reforms within your different departments to combat sexual violence in every case, be it woman, be it man, boy or girl. And to our societies, please let us stop violence. Let's stop conflict. Let us seek peace where we can, and let's always dialogue. And to the survivors, we are in solidarity with you. We know and acknowledge that these have consumed a lot of you. There is justice, and every person that has been able to go through that can get help, whether psychosocial, whether you need to be medicated. They are already those. We just need to make sure that you come out and be able to tell us. Of course, you must find places that are comfortable for you to be able to come out and maybe talk to us. But help is there. You just have to be able to find it at your nearest place. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Diko.
All right. Thank you so much. I think my last words would be, it's a collective responsibility for us to all stand together against conflict-related sexual violence. And as much as we keep denying that it's not happening, there are a lot of people that are perishing out there. There are a lot of women, there are a lot of young girls, there are a lot of boys, there are a lot of men who are suffering. But then all of us envision a better South Sudan, a South Sudan that everybody has an opportunity to grow, to thrive, to have big dreams that they can accomplish. But we cannot just dismiss these big dreams because of the opportunity, because of the power that we have or hold in a specific community. I believe that it's the role of our government to make sure that the rule of law is strengthened and every person that has committed these crimes is put to books and held accountable for the actions that they have committed. And then to the survivors and to the victims, to the people that are experiencing this and to our communities, we need to continue speaking up. Because if we do not speak about what is happening, nobody is going to know. I believe that everybody has a story within them that they can share with the world to be able to bring change. And I just conclude by saying the change we want begins with us. As young people, we play a very big role. We need to continue speaking. We need to continue creating awareness and sensitization. And we also need to continue advocating for policy reforms. Because in doing that, we can have a South Sudan that everybody has an opportunity to thrive.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much, Diko, Janet Isaac, the chairperson of the Youth Advisory Panel with Plan International, and also Bielcha, who is a male champion with Men for Women organization. It was very nice having both of you in the studio, and we hope to have more and more conversation around this topic again on the Zone 72. Thank you, listener of our radio, for following up, and those who dropped their questions and comments on our Facebook live stream, and those who tried to call in, but the network was not helping. So we meet again next Saturday on another topic right here on the Zone 72. Have a nice evening.